am Dave McClain, and I'm proud to be interviewed on the Keith Andrew Network. I support him and his show, and I hope others will as well.
For people who want to know what is the Keith Andrew Network, the whole point of my talk show is to show you that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. To prove them, I still amount to something. It's Keith Andrew, and you're watching the Keith Andrew Network, available on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and all social media. So if you're watching, definitely leave a comment. We'd like to know what you like and what you want to see on the future of the Keith Andrew Network. So that being said, I have 15 questions I want to ask you. But if you're also watching, make sure to go to TikTok and Instagram to watch the Sit Down with Keith Andrew following this episode. First question I want to ask you is, what attracted you to begin your acting career?
Well, I started like a lot of people started doing school plays, and I joined drama club because it just seemed like a fun thing to do. And you could say I found my people there. When I was in school, I was short and smart, and that's a combination not much appreciated. Kids can be cruel. I got picked on a lot. I really didn't seem to fit in anywhere. And I came close to fitting in drama club. And then I just continued with it uh, through the rest of my school years and even into adulthood, doing community theater, even while I was in the Army on active duty. And then when I retired from the Army at the end of my 20-year career, I decided to try to transition to screen acting. And that has worked out pretty well for me. And I still occasionally do plays.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So actually that brings up a bonus question I want to ask you is just a refresher. Sorry, I have ADD. Just a refresher. What motivated you to join the Army? And do you have any favorite memories?
Well, the Army had always interested me. And I think part of the reason is I've always been very interested in history. So, in fact, I taught it. I was a high school history teacher for 7 years. And even though I enjoyed that very much, I just wanted to do something different after a while. And I guess I decided I was going to stop teaching history and make some history. So I served in the Army. I uh, served a lot of different places, but I did deploy to Iraq during that war. I deployed to Haiti after the terrible earthquake they had in 2010. My unit was a logistics unit, and we went to help distribute food and supplies. And I also deployed to Jordan for 9 months in 2014. So there's good and bad things about every place I served and every deployment. Uh, for example, in Iraq, even though I was on a base most of the time, the insurgents would fire rockets at that base, and you'd hear them go off, and you'd kind of wonder if the next one had your name on it. Spoiler alert, I survived. And and then on the other hand, when it came to Jordan, even though there were people there that weren't too fond of Americans, I got to travel around the country, and I got to see some uh, beautiful sites, historic sites, very interesting, and and that was a big thrill.
Now, the two questions I want to ask you is one, what is your opinion with everything going on today in the West? And also, actually, let's stick with that one first.
Do you mean about the war between Israel and Hamas?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, I'm a history guy, and so I have a pretty good perspective on this. Not having ever lived in either of those countries, I mean, Israel being a country, Palestine being an area where a lot of people live that are of Arab descent, and those problems go back to biblical times. And I don't know that we're ever going to solve them, but we definitely won't solve them if terrorism is allowed to take a deeper root in that area. So, as legitimate as the complaints of the Muslims in the Middle East are, you you got to root out terrorism before there's any chance of coming to any sort of agreements or compromises that might bring a lasting peace there. So I hope Israel is successful at eliminating the threat of another Hamas attack, but I also hope that they see the need for peace talks, if not with Hamas, since they are a terrorist organization, at least, with the Palestinian leadership. And hopefully sometime there can be some semblance of a peace in that region.
Yep, absolutely. For me personally speaking, I George Bush Jr. should have been arrested for war crime, number one, because he made the whole thing up. And all he did was take a giant jump on the Middle East and make it worse. And that's why we had ISIS and then we had all this other crap going on. And so, yeah, he seems like a nice guy, but he was not really that bright as a president, number one. And number two, the second biggest mistake that he did was take out Saddam and Gaddafi. I would have left them alone.
Well, I'm not going to criticize a former commander in chief that I served under. Let's just say that no president has had a perfect record regarding the Middle East, and nobody has solved the problems yet. So hopefully, somebody will at some point, but the real solutions have to come from the Arabs and the Jews themselves, or it's not going to be a lasting solution. Our president can facilitate, as they often try to do, but the real solutions have to come from the people that live there.
No, absolutely. And like I said, here on the Keith Andrew Network, freedom of speech, self-expression, say anything you want, talk about anything you want, and I don't care who the next president is, as long as it's not the great orange.
Well, I will agree with you on that point.
So the next one I want to ask you is, what is the biggest change you want to make in your acting career?
Well, I'm very happy with where I am right now, but I want my career to keep growing. I'd like to be in bigger and better projects, uh, projects with bigger budgets, projects that can pay me more. It is a business, an artistic one, but they call it show business for a reason. So I am in this business for the love of it, but I also want to make some money. I want to make what I'm worth, and I hope my worth continues to rise and I get those opportunities and those paychecks commensurate with that. But right now, I'm very happy with the progress I've made so far. And even though I keep reaching higher and resetting goals, I'm enjoying the ride.
Absolutely. And if there's any subjects you don't want to talk about, you can always tell me to shut up, or you can say pass
I
on.
would never, I would never be that rude to you, but yeah, I appreciate that.
So the question I want to ask you is, how did you feel about the strike going on? Because the writers actually made a deal I think that deal is in effect for another 2, 3 years. But do you
Mhm.
think from the very beginning that actors should have had a bigger profit than like the company, Sony and all these other filmmakers and industries out there, Universal and Sony. Do you think that they should have been a little more considerate in the beginning so there wouldn't be so much BS going around?
Yeah, there's issues on both sides. I'm an actor. I'm also a writer and a voiceover artist. I am not in the union at this point. Hope to be someday. But I understand issues on both sides in terms of the producers. They're trying to navigate a rapidly changing entertainment environment, and they want to make sure that they're going to be staying in business for the long haul. However, like most bosses in these labor disputes, they can be very stingy when it comes to profits. They want to get as much out of the workers as they can. And so the actors and writers definitely have legitimate complaints about pay and working conditions. And as they also try to navigate this changing, entertainment environment, they don't want to get lost in the process. They want to get the short end of the stick. So I do support the writers and actors in their strikes. I'm glad the writers' strike is over. I hope the actors' strike ends soon because even though I'm not in the union, um, as I said, I hope to be able to do those jobs someday, maybe someday soon. And the less projects that film and television projects that are out there, indirectly that affects me as well. But I think the most important thing for people to remember about these strikes is that they're really striking for people like me who will be in the union at some point, hopefully, and the people that are in the union that nobody's ever heard of. Okay. This isn't about bigger paychecks for Tom Cruise or
Yeah.
anybody like that. Those guys are doing fine. And they would be the first to tell you that. Yes, they want certain work conditions as well. But really, this is about the lower people on the totem pole, the ones who aren't famous yet, who may never be famous, who are struggling to make a living and just want to be treated fairly. So this isn't about the rich getting richer. This is about people with legitimate workplace and pay concerns getting a fair shake. And these are the people that need these issues addressed the most, the ones that you don't hear of, the vast majority of the people in the unions. This is really for them.
No, you're absolutely right. Next one I want to add to, it's, the same thing, about you look at companies like, I don't know, I recently was in a Target. They only had one cashier and they had all self checkouts. And you had customer service by, big deal. But the fact you had a line of 20 people, one cashier, and they're forcing you to use self checkout, that's bullshit, number one. And it's
Yeah, I
uncensored.
hate
You can
that.
say anything you want. I mean, okay, what? Self checkout, it's great if you have 10 small items. Like if you have a whole wagon filled, it's like, look, I don't work here. Why should I know what the barcode is for this item or that? But the thing is, they save so much more money on self checkout when instead of hiring the normal person. So the reason I bring this up is it's kind of like the writer's strike and the acting strike. Do you think the retail people in the retail market, the normal consumer, who should go on strike and say, you know what, we're not being who wants to work for $10 an hour? We should be paid $20 an hour. We should have $25 an hour. How are you supposed to live on minimum wage? Now, is that the same thing as the actors going on strike? Because they talk about CGI and they talk about, cutbacks and, more money for the big name stars, but the normal person's being screwed over too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and there is a parallel to be drawn there. Um, that store that has one cashier open and 20 people in line, that's not just annoying to the customer. That's tough on the cashier. Think about how hard that person is working. But of course, to get these things changed uh, reliably and in a real way, they have to be in a union. And a lot of workers that need higher pay and better working conditions aren't in unions. And the ones that are, the bosses try to break those unions sometimes because that cuts into their profits. But we're talking about fairness here. And yes, we are talking about survival. Um, an actor or a writer who's employed on a regular basis is certainly making more than minimum wage, but they're not making a lot, and their income isn't steady and reliable. Even though the minimum wage worker deserves to make more, they at least have a fairly predictable regular paycheck. So if you're an actor in a TV show or a crew member, you may be able to work as long as that show lasts, but what about when that show's over? It doesn't mean you got another show waiting for you. You might have to go months, maybe years, and you're going to have money in the bank. And how are you going to get enough money in the bank to tide yourself over in between jobs when a lot of these people are living in LA and New York and other places where it's very expensive to live? So, like I said, the vast majority of the people in the union, they are struggling to survive, to pay their bills. Yeah, it's a dream, but you got to live. And so they sacrifice for their dream. They don't have a regular paycheck. Sometimes they don't get paid what they're worth. And these are the kind of things that have led the union to strike. Sure, the effects of the strikes will probably benefit people closer to the top of the pay scale, but there's a lot more people way below them that really need these benefits that are going to get them now.
Well, let me ask you this because you bring up an interesting point. Why are people against, well, certain companies are against having unions? I'm a big professional wrestling fan, and a couple of wrestlers got fired. Sorry, entertainers got fired for saying WWE should be unionized. So why is it that certain individuals say, okay, yes, it's great to have a union. It's always great to have someone looking out for you. But why is that like a double standard? Because most of these people say they work for a company, but they're independent contractors. And so they don't really, well, I guess a way, if they're on TV, they work for the company. But a lot of wrestlers are independent contractors.
Well, to answer your question in a single word, greed. It's a story as old as time. I'm not saying that there aren't bosses and employers who don't do right by their employees, but you're talking about a bigger picture here. Throw any example of a union into the mix and we'd have the same conversation. If you look back on the history of unions, it's it's history repeating itself since the beginning of workers organizing. Workers organize, bosses try to prevent that, break the union, wait out a strike, whatever it is. It's because those people want to make as much money as they can. They believe they're entitled to it. And you'll hear the owners and the employers saying, well, if we can't keep this business running, nobody's employed. That's true. But then you'll hear the workers say, if it wasn't for our effort, there wouldn't be a business at all. Also true. So what has to happen is those two points of view need to be reconciled in a way that's fair to both sides. Now, the owners and employers, they already have the power. They own the business. They sign the paychecks. But what about the other side of the ledger? When do workers have the power? Usually only if they unionize. So that is their only outlet to insist upon and receive higher pay and better working conditions. If the owners and employers are successful in keeping them from unionizing, they get to keep more of the money and they get to make all the decisions about pay and working conditions, and the workers are left at their mercy to take what they're offering or go work somewhere else. So the only way to make the equation close to equal is for there to be unions.
No, I agree with you 100%. Now, the next one I want to ask you, it's a big thing going on. A lot of people can see it. A lot of people, I know I have filter glasses, but I can see it clear as day. How do you feel about climate change? In a couple, the ocean's rising, the ice is melting, Long Island, New York is going to be underwater, Louisiana's already sinking, and especially with all the refugees, coming over, it's only going to get worse. Number one, but there's so many things that we can do right now. Plant more trees, and there's so I'm drawing a blank, but there's so many things we can do. But it's kind of like no one's taking it seriously until it's too late.
Yeah. Well, climate change is real. Anybody denying it at this point is just ignorant of the facts or ignoring the facts. The extent to which it's man made, that's something we can have a discussion about. But there definitely is a man made component to climate change. Now, if you look back over the history of the Earth, the climate changes on its own from time to time. The last ice age, there were not industries and factories around then. So clearly that wasn't man made. These things are going to happen whether man affects them or not. But is mankind doing things to affect the climate on top of the natural cycle? Absolutely. We have to face up to that. We've been remiss in not addressing it earlier. The reason? Same one word answer I gave you to your last question: greed. The people who are in charge want as much money as they can get. And hey, I'm all for free enterprise, but it's got to be responsible. It's got to be fair. Regarding your last question, you got to be fair to workers. Regarding this question, you have to be responsible in terms of taking care of the environment. Nobody wants to think about their children or their grandchildren having to suffer under increasingly significant weather events, but we see it happening all around us. And if we look back over our recent history, 10, 20, 50 years ago, just a blip in the history of the earth, we can see significant change. And there are things we can do to at least slow the change, if not reverse it. Everybody, from the average person on the street up to the owner of a factory and the owner of a corporation under which that factory operates, we all have responsibilities. And if we all pitch in and make some changes, they don't have to be expensive changes. They don't have to break us. Sometimes it's just putting a little elbow grease in. Sometimes it costs money, but we got to do the things that take care of the earth. It's the only planet we got.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, are you a fan of Two and a Half Men?
I watched it a little bit. I can't say I was a fan. I didn't watch it regularly.
There's a joke. Jake walks over to the casket of someone who passed away, and he says, "Why does he need a watch? It's not like he's going to be late for anything."
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's true. Like I said, that's trying to lighten up the mood. But
Yeah.
there's so many things out there. The human race can do so many great things, but unfortunately, the human race is really good at, and I'm being sarcastic at this, the human race is really good at self-destructing.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think part of human nature is being short-sighted. We don't look down the road and think about the impact of the things we're doing now, the impact that that's going to have on the planet, on generations to come, even in the next few years. We just don't. Most people think about primarily themselves, looking out for numbers, as they say, and do what's right for them today or in the next few years. But as compassionate human beings, we need to think about those who are coming after us. We need to make it personal, not just for ourselves in the present, but for our children, our grandchildren, for people that are going to be living where we're living 100 years from now. It's the responsible, compassionate thing to do. And because it's human nature to be selfish and short-sighted, we have to rise above that. We have to be intentional about thinking about these issues and what we can and should do to make things better. We have to take the time, put in the effort. If we're going to call ourselves responsible and compassionate, we have to do those things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air, but wrapping up, how can our fans and listeners get in touch with you?
Well, I appreciate that. I am on Instagram, one Dave McClain, one word, the number one, DAVEMCCLAIN. I'm also on Facebook. In terms of my acting career, the biggest thing I've done is one of the most recent things that's been released, a psychological horror movie called Aged, AGED, and that is streaming on Amazon Prime and Tubi. I got a lot of things out right now, some streaming, some on YouTube. We don't have time to go into them all, but I would say if people watch Aged and put a review on IMDb, that would be great. And if there's any casting directors or producers out there, I've been working very hard, as many actors do. We work hard, we pay our dues, and we just need opportunities to move forward. And I put myself in all of those categories. I've been acting professionally for the screen for just over 7 years. In that time, I have completed 162 screen acting projects, among them 92 films. That may sound impossible, especially since I don't live in New York or LA or Atlanta, but I can prove it. And I've been enjoying it, but like I said, I want to reach higher and go further. So I hope I get some opportunities to do that and join the union at some point. But yeah, check out Aged. It came out really well. It's my first major role in a feature film. We're all pretty proud of it. And I believe it should help the careers of everybody involved with it. Anubis Lopez, an up-and-coming director in the Houston area, and my co-stars in the movie, Carla Kidd, Morgan Boss Maltese, Bria DeGuano, and others. We all put our heart and soul into that project, and these are hardworking, good people who deserve to have a break and be able to move their careers forward as well. So check out Aged on Amazon Prime and Tubi.
No, absolutely. And all your information will be in the bottom of the screen. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, make sure to go to Instagram and TikTok about to sit down with Keith Andrew, wrapping up our interview segment. It was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest. And until we meet again, catch you later.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
And have a good night.
Well, enough is enough, and it's time for a change.